2027, making everyone, not just a few, better off. Making Britain a clean energy superpower, delivering a net zero future for our country and our planet, for our children and theirs. Building an NHS fit for the future, where everyone lives well for longer. Making Britain's streets safe, raising confidence in our police and justice systems to their highest level. These are Labour's priorities. A safe, prosperous, healthy, green future. Not for some of us, but for all of us. These priorities are very far from what the current government puts first. You don't have to listen to their speeches to know that. You just have to live here. Now, there is no greater mission, no more important mission, no mission more clearly Labour than the mission we are here to talk about today. To ensure that opportunity is for everyone. The background is no barrier to getting on, that every child has the best start in life. For me, as for Keir, this mission is not merely the core of our politics, it is deeply personal. Because I grew up in a town very much like Gillingham, a shipbuilding town where yards closed and employment vanished. A time when jobs were scarce, money was short and poverty all too common. But for me in Washington, up in the northeast, in the midst of all of that, I was lucky. I was lucky because I had a family rich in love and a school which saw the value and worth in each and every one of us, that set high standards and that saw no reason why we should not meet them. I had an education which prepared me not just to face the future, but to shape it. I got the chances to succeed. Too many of the young people around me did not. And I'm here today in front of all of you introducing Keir because of that luck. But it goes to the heart of my politics, to everything I hold true, that life should not come down to luck, that education must be about opportunity, and that opportunity must be for each of us and for all of us. Not for some, not for a few, not a society where a few lucky souls are plucked from poverty, where deep inequality is justified by who is up and who is down, but opportunity for all of us. And I know this must not be an idle dream. The dream of a free and equal society is a dream we can and must achieve, a dream which the next Labour government will work tirelessly to deliver. And it begins with a better start for every child, with childcare and early education to support every family and every child, to enable them to achieve and thrive. High and rising standards in all our schools, because there is no greater engine of opportunity. There are no greater champions for our young people than the staff who work in them. And there is no clearer way of making sure our young people are both ready for work and ready for life. And a better skills and university system. Because in too much of our country, for too many of our communities, for too much of our economy, too many of our people aren't getting the chances they need to succeed and upskill, not just to get by, but to get on. Above all, it is all about hope. The hope at root that Britain's best days lie ahead of us, that our future will be brighter than our past. That is the hope at the heart of Labour's ambition for Britain. And that is why there is no greater privilege than to introduce the leader of the Labour Party, the man I know is ready to be our next Prime Minister, to set out the brighter future we are determined to create for each of us and for all of us, the mission on opportunity which the next Labour government will deliver. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for those words. Thank you for everything that you've done on this mission, which is so important to you personally. Thank you. And thank you to Mid-Kent College for hosting us, for being here. And yeah. Do you know, it's fantastic to be able to launch a mission which so many of you have devoted your lives to. So thank you very much for that. Now, one of the things I learnt from my teachers is that persuasive argument depends on clear objectives. So let me say that two things. One, that Labour has a plan to tear down the barriers to opportunity that hold this country and its people back. Two, that I see this mission as our core purpose and my personal cause. To fight at every stage for every child the pernicious idea that background equals destiny. That your circumstances, who you are, where you come from, who you know, might shape your life more than your talent, your effort, and your enterprise. No, breaking that link, that's what Labour is for. I've always felt that, and it runs very deep for me. I grew up in a small town in southern England. We had a semi-detached house, pebble-dashed, as I think I may have mentioned previously, with mum, dad, 4 kids, 4 dogs, and a blue Ford Cortina outside. This was the 1970s. And I'm not pleading poverty, not at all. But that's just how life was. But I do look back now and think I've been on a journey. To go from an ordinary working class background to leading the Crown Prosecution Service and now the Labour Party, I feel both privileged and proud. But over the last year or so, I've been thinking more and more about it, because there's more than a touch of the 1970s about our economic situation right now. Like then, we face a cost of living crisis that gnaws away at our ability to move forward. So I think about what it felt like to get on during that period. About the fact I did see plenty of people from my background go on to achieve their aspirations. And I don't think I'm being too sentimental to say I grew up surrounded by hope. We took it for granted. A sense that enterprise, hard work and imagination would be rewarded in Britain. That even in tough times this would see us through. That things would get better for families like ours. Now, my parents didn't just believe this. It comforted them. It's what everyone wants for their family. More than a British value, a story we still tell to our children. Work hard and you can achieve anything. Work hard and you will get a fair chance in Britain. The question is, do we still believe it? Do you look around our country today and believe, with the certainty you deserve, that Britain will be better for you or your children? Because you should. That's something we should be able to trust, all of us. An unwritten contract, a bond of hope between citizen and country, generation and generation. So I promise you this, whatever the obstacles to opportunity, wherever the barriers to hope, my Labour government will tear them down. And as with all our missions, we'll do so spurred on by clear and measurable goals. That we will change Britain, break the link between where you start in life and where you end up, and we can measure that. The earnings of our children should not be determined by those of their parents. And make no mistake, from where we are now, that's an ambitious target. But it's also urgent. This is the world of artificial intelligence, of technologies that stretch the boundaries of our imagination. We've got to meet that with an open mind, turn our gaze towards our children's future, and make sure we're preparing them for life and work in their Britain. As I said in Leith recently, can come to our shores, but the rest of the world is pushing forward as well. The race for the future is unforgiving, so we've got to move fast. must unlock the potential that is in every community, grow the talents of every child. And this means we've got to get to the bottom of a challenge with a long history. The roots of this are deep. In part, it's about security, and especially the diminishing access to affordable homes. When I think back to the 1970s, to the cost of living crisis we faced then, that pebbled ash semi my parents owned, that was my springboard, the secure foundation that gave us stability as the world beyond our front door became more uncertain. It's about community as well. For a long time now, too many people have had to leave theirs to find success, had to get out to get on. And when talented young people start to leave a town, it becomes hard to break free from that dynamic. It's a vicious cycle. It leads to communities, far too many in this country, where the only jobs on offer are low-paid and insecure. And insecurity is the enemy of opportunity. It places barriers, not just economic barriers.
Reinstate your pledge for 28 billion per year.
I gave on the mission on green power, we did that last one. We've done that one. Will you just... We are on the side of economic growth. Will you just let me please get on with this? Thank you very much.
Stop making U-turns here.
We have already... will you just let me finish this and I'll come and talk to you about it? Thank you very much.
We've tried to speak to you about it, but you haven't replied to us, Keir.
Look,
we need a Green New Deal right now.
Look,
and you keep making
my last speech was about this. Will you please, there's lots of people who want to hear this. Please don't drown them out. Please don't drown them out. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right now.
I think they may have missed the fact that the last mission I launched was on clean power by 2030, which is the single most effective way to get the green future that they and many others want. Let me continue, because it places barriers, not just economic barriers, subtle barriers in the minds of working people. Chips away at the stability of family life, the reservoirs of confidence that people from less privileged backgrounds need to get on. I'm sorry to say it, but that's what the cost of living crisis is doing right now, what the Tory mortgage bombshell is doing, what the total collapse of house building is doing. But look, there's something more pernicious here. A pervasive idea, a barrier in our collective mind that narrows our ambitions for working class children and says, sometimes with subtlety, sometimes to your face, this isn't for you. Some people call it the class ceiling, and that's a good name for it. Yes, economic insecurity, structural and racial injustice are part of it, of course they are. But it's also about a fundamental lack of respect, a snobbery that too often extends into adulthood, raising its ugly head when it comes to inequalities at work, in pay, promotions, opportunities. Take my dad. He was a toolmaker, and a good one. Highly skilled, proud of his work. But back in the 1980s, the Tories made it quite clear that people like him were not valued, that actually they didn't see the point of our country making things, that his skills were not part of their future. This hurt him. Whenever anyone asked that old question, what do you do for a living? I could see him visibly pull away. He felt looked down on, disrespected. It chipped away at his esteem. Now, I'm not going to pretend the Thatcher government invented this kind of snobbery. In truth, it's always been there. But what happened back then is that our economy fundamentally changed. And the complacency that we didn't need to educate all our children because they could just leave school at 16 and get a good job in their community, that was exposed. almost overnight. And this cultural bruise, it's still with us. And we have to confront it. The last Labour government had the best record on education in the history of our country. We expanded higher education, fundamentally raised school standards, gave millions of working class children, children of all backgrounds, the tools to thrive in a new knowledge economy. But honestly, we didn't tackle this. Didn't eradicate the snobbery that looks down on vocational education. Didn't drain the well of disrespect that creates and that cost us. Because when economic success began to cluster in fewer communities, when the penalty of not going to university became more severe, that left us without a response, chasing the future, unable to prepare all our children for work and life in their Britain. So these are the two fundamental questions we must now ask of our education system. Are we keeping pace with the future, preparing all our children to face it? And are we prepared to confront the toxic divides that maintain the class ceiling? Hold them in your mind, because if they were a rumble of concern 13 years ago, they're a deafening roar now. Rishi Sunak has given up on education reform. He's not interested in our children's future. And if you think that's unfair, then let me remind you what happened during the pandemic when he, as Chancellor, cancelled the National Recovery Plan. After our children, and working class children in particular, gave up so much for the greater good. The Tory party to turn around afterwards and repay their sacrifice with nothing. To sit there twiddling their thumbs as teachers leave in their droves, school buildings start to crumble, and absenteeism goes through the roof. That's shameful. And this is what the Tories don't get. Those two questions, remember them? Can we prepare all our children for the future? Will we confront the divides that maintain the class ceiling? They're one and the same. I'm serious. The sheep and goats mentality that's always been there in English education, the academic for my kids, vocational for your kids snobbery, has no place in modern society, no connection to the jobs of the future. No. For our children to succeed, they need to be grounded in both, need knowledge and skills, practical problem solving and academic rigour, curiosity and a love of learning. That's always been critical. But now, as the future rushes towards us, we also need a greater emphasis on creativity, on resilience, on emotional intelligence, and the ability to adapt. All of the attributes, to put it starkly, that make us human, that distinguish us from learning machines, make our communities, our lives so rich and rewarding. Honestly, we've got to get this into our heads. It isn't the case that the status quo only fails children outside the academic route. Without modernising education, we're also failing the children who do go down that route, preparing them all for a world that's receding into the past. So, just as I will bulldoze through planning laws to reignite the dream of home ownership, just as I will take the tough decisions necessary to win the race for the jobs of the future, rebuild the secure foundation opportunity depends upon, the safer streets, the cheaper, clean electricity, the NHS fit for the future, sustained growth in every community, so too will I introduce a curriculum fit for the digital age. So too will I fight for vocational training to be respected as much as university education. Drag our education system into the future and shatter the class ceiling. Thank you. So let me set out 5 areas where a reformed education system can be the game changer. 5 barriers that, taken together, we must tear down to prepare our children for the future. Barrier 1, the insecurity that right now is destabilising family life. Our response, part of the strong foundation our children need to get on, most of all in the early years, which we all know from all the evidence are so crucial to lifelong flourishing. Let me tell you about Osob. This is a constituent of mine from Camden. Osob started attending Children's Centre when her son was 18 months old. At the time, she was sleeping on her mum's floor, suffering from depression and poverty. Now, thanks to the work of that Children's Centre, kept open by a Labour council, she's managed to get on her feet, a flat of her own, tailored support for her son, now diagnosed with autism, on his language development, and a place for him at the nursery. Osob is a parent's champion in our community now. A life turned around. But now, after the wreckage of the past 13 years, her story is becoming rarer and rarer. Now, I won't mince my words. Rebuilding these services is going to be difficult. But we can start that journey with a clear target: to boost child development with 500,000 more children hitting their early language targets by 2030. And we will set out the first steps: thousands more health visitors in the community, expanding mental health access for new parents, and working with local authorities to boost capacity in our childcare system, raise standards in early education, stop the growing number of nurseries that right now are being forced to shut their doors for good. Barrier 2, confidence. It sounds simple, but all the teachers here will know just how important it is. In every class there are kids who have so much ability and talent, but who struggle to find within themselves the confidence to express it, the belief that their ideas matter, the voice to speak up. This is a subtle and significant layer of the class ceiling. Don't doubt that. The inability to speak fluently is one of the biggest barriers to opportunity. And also, it's a massive challenge left behind by the pandemic, particularly in early language development. Just think for a moment how sad that is. Watching those first playful steps towards expression, that has to be one of the greatest joys of parenting, of life even. But it must also be one of the greatest anxieties if your child is struggling. So let's take this on. Let's raise the importance of speaking skills, oracy as some academics call it, because these skills are absolutely critical for our children's future success. First and foremost, of course, for academic attainment. Talking through your ideas before putting them on a page, that improves writing. Structured classroom discussion deepens thinking. But it's not just a skill for learning, it's also a skill for life. Not just for the workplace, also for working out who you are, for overcoming shyness or disaffection, anxiety or doubt, or even just for opening up more to our friends and family. We don't do enough of that as a society. I'm as guilty as anyone. But wouldn't that be something precious for our children to aim for? I think so. Confident speaking gives you a steely core, an inner belief to make your case in any environment, whether that's persuading your mum to buy some new trainers, argument, or even your daughter to let go of the iPhone. It's not foolproof, but we do need to nurture it early, in the early years in primary school. So today I can announce we will give every primary school new funding, paid for by removing tax breaks on private schools, that will let them invest in world intervention, help our children find their voice. Barrier 3, an outdated curriculum. The mentality that cleaves to a comfort zone, a conservatism that refuses to re-examine whether what we teach our children should keep pace with the world outside. I say in no uncertain terms, it should. Because the race is on. All around the world, the best in class are rethinking their curricula. And every one of them is putting greater creativity front and centre, including countries like Estonia and Singapore. So today we start to catch up. We will update the Progress 8 performance measure, and we will use it to get children studying a creative arts subject or sport until they are 16. But we will also go further. We'll weave oracy through a new national curriculum that finally closes the gap between learning and life, academic and practical vocational skills, school and work. A curriculum that will finally crack the code on digital skills too. We've got to address this. The old way, learning out-of-date IT on 20-year-old computers, doesn't work. But neither does the new fashion that every kid should be a coder when artificial intelligence away. The basic truth is this: to prepare our children for their future, we've got to use every opportunity in every classroom to nurture digital skills. Ticking a one subject, one lesson a week box simply won't work anymore. So the next Labour government will review the national curriculum. And today, we will set out the principles of our review. How we must deliver high standards for every child. How we must crack the code on digital skills, starting that journey early in primary school. And how we need every young person, whatever their background, to see themselves in the curriculum, with role models and stories that can inspire them to do great things. And look, I know people have been arguing about this for a long time. And I salute those teachers who, over the past few years, have developed a rich curriculum of flowing knowledge, of deep conceptual understanding. And let me be clear, Labour will build on that. But this debate about the relative importance of knowledge and skills, people outside the education world are baffled by it. And they're right. Everyone with their feet on the ground in the real world knows you need both. And these old arguments, old practices, old divides, they're holding our children back. Most of all, on Barrier 4, this country's attitude towards vocational education. Make no mistake, this is one with the deepest roots. And we can't rip it out by ourselves. This has to be a shared undertaking. It's not just businesses, colleges and parents. It's the whole of society. We've all been shaped by the class ceiling. We have to remove it. And there are steps we can take today. First, a practical goal to give more people than ever access to the best quality post-19 training. Next, a proper national skills plan led by a new body, Skills England, that will work hand in glove with our industrial policy and make sure we can compete in the race for the jobs of the future. And finally, a new growth and skills levy that doubles down on apprenticeships, high quality apprenticeships, and that looks again at the full breadth of formal training available, identifies the best options and gives businesses greater flexibility to invest in them. Whether that's the tech boot camps that can train AI experts in a week, the technical courses that can prepare young people for the engineering jobs they need in clean energy, or the traineeships that can give kids a foot in the door in the first place. Finally, 5. The soft bigotry of low expectations. An old barrier, but one that always needs more work. Now, before anyone says it, I know that's something that Michael Gove said. I didn't agree with everything he did in education, clearly. But when he said that, It was an important strike against the class ceiling, an acknowledgement that school standards are the most fundamental front line in the battle for more opportunity. And whatever else you thought about education in that period, the Tories simply don't care anymore. They're not interested in raising school standards. How can they be, when the number of teachers leaving the profession is at record highs? When in parts of the country, adverts for a math, no applicants. We've got to turn this around urgently. That's why we'll tackle the retention crisis by rewarding great new teachers who commit to a career in the classroom. Why we'll recruit more teachers in shortage subjects, over 6,500 more. And why, to support high standards, we will reform Ofsted so that it works for parents and children once more. Safeguarding review should happen every year. And parents deserve a clearer picture on how their children are being educated. Not a one-word judgment, a whole dashboard. This is the formula. Effective accountability, high-quality teaching, a curriculum that prepares you for life and work. That's what Labour will deliver, high standards for all of our children. So, 5 barriers we can tear down. A new plan for a new future. The road to respect and shattering the class ceiling. You know, in Somerstown, in my constituency, one of the poorest areas in London, kids can look out of their window down at King's Cross and Granary Square and see out there a glittering world of opportunity. Construction everywhere, global technology firms, a whole new city being built just a mile away, but one that can feel so distant to them, almost another world. I want them to imagine themselves there, and for that to feel natural, whatever their race, whatever their background, to think they belong, that success belongs to them, that in this country your circumstances don't hold you back. You don't have to change who you are just to get on. And this isn't a zero-sum game. If we grow the talents of every person in this country, that benefits everyone. Think about it. The sharp elbows, the ladder pulling, the all-consuming fear of failure. It all springs from the same well as my dad's feeling of disrespect. A rational response, perhaps, to the rungs of opportunity moving further and further apart, but an inequality that exhausts people and this country and unravels the obligations we hold to each other. This is what my political project, my mission is about. Because if we do shatter the class ceiling, that's the prize. A nation, once again a community. A country where we share a stake in every child, not just our own. A Britain with its future back. United, moving forward, standing tall, that delivers security, backs aspiration, opportunity for all, and believes, truly believes, that the future will be better for its children. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Questions from the media. Beth Rigby, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you, Keir Starmer. Beth Rigby, Sky News. Keir Starmer, your mission is to make sure every child isn't held back by their background. You've said you want to get state schools to the same level as private schools, but it needs more than words. It needs resource. The National Association of Head Teachers have welcomed your reforms, but they have also said this, that it needs significant additional investment. will be needed for schools, that they need the more resource. So will you commit to more investment for schools and education ahead of the next general election to fulfil what you've already set out? Thank you.
Yeah, but the approach I've taken in this mission and all our missions is to set out the change that we need to make and why we need to make it. In this case, removing those barriers to opportunity. And where that involves money, to explain how much and where it's going to come from. And obviously that getting rid of the tax breaks for private schools, the VAT, does yield over £1 billion, and that we will use for the jobs and for the initiatives we set out, including recruiting 6,500 new teachers, including the retention payment for existing teachers, and to create the framework in which they're better respected. So that's the approach we've taken. On the broader question of funding, what I would say is, look, a Labour government always takes education seriously. It is now possible to compare these 13 years with the 13 years under a Labour government, and you can see the difference, the emphasis on education and the quality of education. That's why I said what I did about the last Labour government. Obviously, as we get closer to an election, we will send out in even greater detail our funding. We can't hide from the fact we're going to inherit a really damaged economy after 13 years of failure. Can't hide the fact that we're going to inherit failed public services that are on their knees or on their face after 13 years of neglect, and we have to take hard decisions. But we will set that out as we go forward, and bear in mind and hold in your mind just what the last Labour government did on education. Thank you, Beth. Chris, can I come to you?
Thank you. Chris Mason, BBC News. Tomorrow's going to see another day of disruption and missed education for many, with plenty of teachers out on strike. Realistically, why should we believe you'd be any better placed to sort this out, given, as you acknowledge, the constraints you might inherit economically?
Because if I was Prime Minister, I had the privilege to be Prime Minister, and Bridget Phillipson was the Education Secretary of State, I would ask her and tell her and require her to get in negotiating every day of the week until it was resolved. They've got to. Children not being able to school is damaging. Everybody knows that. Teachers know it. Nobody wants this industrial action. We have to resolve it. The government's got a report, a recommendation. It's sitting on it, doing nothing. And in the meantime, it's not having the negotiations. So get in the room, negotiate and sort this out and get our schools back working. Thank you, Chris. Robert Peston.
Robert Peston, ITV. You mentioned in your speech school buildings that are crumbling, IT equipment that's obsolete, not fit for purpose. All the stats show public servants in schools, in hospitals, in the civil service have fallen massively behind the private sector since 2010. Now, one of your constant refrains is, there's no money, to coin a phrase. But I think what people would like to know is, if you win the next election, when would you hope that there will be money to invest seriously in public services? And secondly, one of your announcements today that doesn't require money is changing the national curriculum. A general election is 18 months away, possibly. Why not announce those changes before the election rather than delay them by saying you'll look at them if you win the election?
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Look, we are going to inherit a very badly damaged economy. There's no doubt about that, and we have to make difficult decisions. In answer to your question, what are we going to do about it? We have to grow the economy, and that means growing the economy in every part of the country, not just in London and the South East, and raising living standards. And that was my mission number one, about the fastest sustainable growth in the G7, because in a sense that underpins everything. And the other missions are all ladder up to that central mission, because if we had grown the economy in the last 13 years, as well as we did under the last Labour government, we would have tens of billions of pounds to spend on our public services, on education, without making any alterations to tax. So that has to be the central driving force. I have to say that not everything that we need to do is all about money. some of the reforms are not about money, whether it's in education or in health, which I was speaking about the other week. And there are things that we can do now that we're setting out here. On the curriculum, look, what we want, we're determined to do this review and to change our curriculum. We need to do that in a thoughtful way, in a way that brings the country with it. This isn't the sort of thing that you should do for 2 or 3 years and then change back 2 or 3 years later. It's got to be part of a national debate, a consensus about where we go next. I think the case for change is compelling. I've set out the principles that we would want to underpin the review, but I do think it's best that that review is done in government when we've got the ability to bring everybody together behind what will be a really important change in our education system. Thank you, Robert. I've got Peter Walker from The Guardian. Next. Peter.
Hi. Keir, study after study has shown that child poverty is a massive determinant of educational and social outcomes for young people. When Labour came to power in 1997, that was the defining mission that they brought with them. We've now reached the end of your 5 missions, and poverty, in particular child poverty, has, as far as I've noticed, not really got much of a mention. Now, while I understand you can't set out any fiscal details until closer to the time, is it one of your defining missions? And if so, what are you going to do about it?
Peter, firstly, let me acknowledge the role that poverty plays, poverty and insecurity in this. And just as the last Labour government was laser focused on poverty, so will any incoming Labour government. Some of the issues I've set out in other missions are relevant to this. So, for example, what we're saying about housing, about affordable housing, security, etc., are very, very important to poverty. And you know, the economic situation, the security of growing our economy, and the way we will grow it in every community so that living standards of every family go up, because in the end, that's the way to deal with poverty. But poverty is sort of the foundation, if you like, along with others. Or getting rid of poverty is the foundation on which these missions sit. So there is, in each mission, there are strands on poverty, as in this mission. But, you know, the resolve to deal with poverty will be just as great in an incoming Labour government as it was in the last Labour government. Thank you, Peter. Lizzie from the Mirror.
Hi, Keir. Lizzie Buckham from the Daily Mirror. The Labour government in Wales, Andy Burnham, Steve Khan, the teaching unions, and a recent poll showed 89% of Labour members support expanding free school meals to primary school children as a tool to boost attainment and ensure kids don't go hungry. Why won't you consider it?
Lizzie, thank you. I mean, this is a healthy debate in the country and in the Labour Party, and obviously a number of councils and in Wales and mayors have committed to it. We've taken a different route, which is clubs and other structured support, rather than go down that route. Of course, we want to move forward, but you know, we are constrained by the economics, and we are constrained also by this question of whether that is the best targeting of the resources that we've got. But we've gone down the route of breakfast clubs, but other councils and Wales have gone down a different route. And it's a debate we should welcome as an ongoing debate about what's the best way here to move forward. Thank you, Lizzie. I've got Harriet from the Daily Mail.
Harriet Line, the Daily Mail. You've spoken today about the cost of living pressures facing families across the country. Do you agree, as your candidate in Uxbridge says, that now is not the right time to expand ULEZ?
Thank you very much for that. Danny Bills is our candidate in Uxbridge, very good candidate too. And he is rightly raising concern on behalf of what he hopes will be his constituents in relation to ULEZ, because we all understand the impact it has financially. I think it's important when we have this discussion to properly recognise the context. There is a legal requirement to deal with air pollution. So it's not just a political choice that is made in the abstract. It's got to be, and that's why ULEZ was, the first ULEZ was introduced by a Tory mayor. So, you know, for the purposes of the by-elections, it's being used as a party political tool. But actually, the legal framing of it is there in legislation, which nobody can escape. And the first to put a ULEZ scheme in place were actually a Tory administration. But Danny Bills is right to say what he said in sticking up for what he hopes will be his constituents. Thank you, Harriet. I've got Steph from the Daily Express.
Thank you. Steph Sparrow from the Daily Express. There are concerns that gender-neutral toilets in schools increase the risk of girls being harmed. Do you believe schools must have single-sex toilets? And then, if I may, would secondary schools need to inform parents when a child questions their gender identity under a Labour government? Thank you.
I think this should be subject to guidance, and we've been calling for guidance for a very, very long time. We called for the government to put guidance in place a year ago, more than a year ago, and they still haven't done so. So I urge them to get on with that guidance. We can then all look at it and debate it against what the guidance is. And, you know, I say to the government yet again, bring that guidance forward, let us look at it, let us have a debate about it, and then with a bit of luck we can move forward in a way which puts protection and well-being of children at its heart and not political point scoring. Thank you very much. I've got Anna from Grazia. Anna.
Hi, yeah, Anna Silverman from Grazia magazine. You talk about growing the economy, but parents, usually women, are dropping out of the workforce to pay for extortionate childcare. How would you make childcare more affordable?
We've set out a number of measures in relation to childcare. I do acknowledge straight away that that is a barrier, particularly for all parents and carers, but particularly for women, and is important for the child as well. So we have set out the sort of down payment in relation to what we would do on childcare. Of course, we'd like to go further because it is very, very important, but Bridget's already set that out. It sort of underpins this mission rather than being a central part of what I set out this morning, but it is crucial to it. Thank you very much. Jack from The Sun. Do we need a mic? Oracy.
Thanks very much, Keir. Jack Elson from The Sun. Recently, your shadow Work and Pension Secretary called the two-child benefit cap heinous and suggested that Labour would scrap it. Can you confirm if that is Labour's policy? And secondly, earlier, you railed against the arrogance of groups like Just Stop Oil. But in Labour-run Wales, they say they are cooperating with such groups, and Extinction Rebellion are even boasting about writing Mark Drakeford's green policies. Do you think that's appropriate?
Look, in relation to the benefit cap, obviously that isn't our policy, and if it changes, I'll let you know. On Just Stop Oil, I mean, I just think they need to just stop. They're in, you know, particularly this last week, they've been interrupting iconic sporting events, causing massive disruption. There's a huge arrogance involved, that they're the only people that understand the argument. Their tactics, the only tactics going to win. And when I put what they're doing against what we set out in our mission about clean energy, about net zero, you can see the difference between, you know, protest and power. The gluing yourself, interrupting, interfering with other people's lives in this arrogant way, compared with the actual change we can bring about, which is with a Labour government absolutely committed to clean power by 2030. Thank you very much. I've got Dominic from The Telegraph.
Thanks, Keir. Dominic Penner here on The Telegraph. In January, Labour pledged to put the money for charitable status for private schools. You pledged that you'd spend that on 6,500 new staff. Today, you're spending it on various other bits in schools. Earlier this week, you said you would spend it on sort of golden hellos to teachers, 2,500 per teacher. Are you just spending the same money 3 times? And further to your U-turn on green energy, the latest in a line of Labour U-turns, how can voters trust you any more than the protesters earlier?
Well, look, firstly, on the money, by abolishing the tax break for private schools, that yields over £1 billion. That's more than enough and adequately covers the commitment. One of the things that we do on these mission launches is to publish a supporting paper, which you've either got or will soon have, which sets out exactly what each of these commitments costs and how that money comes from the one. On the question of green power, there's no U-turn at all. We haven't backed down. We've doubled down. Because I gave a mission saying there are 5 big things that an incoming Labour government is going to do. Purpose-driven. The whole point of these missions is these are the 5 things that matter most. This is the change that you can expect to see after 5 or 10 years of a Labour government. And when it comes to difficult decisions, we will prioritise the missions over other things. That's going to be tough. So when I set out as my 4th mission, clean power by 2030, that is not doubling, that's doubling down on it, particularly on the £28 billion, which is a huge amount to invest for the future. So the framing, I just don't accept. I think most people look at that mission and say, if we could achieve that ambition, that is the route to lower bills, to energy security, because people boot on our throat, to the next generation of skills and jobs that are so vital, and of course what we need to do in order to meet our net zero obligations. So I think that's a very ambitious mission, and not many people who heard that speech or looked at that mission have said to me, you're not going far enough. Most of them said, whoa, that is going to be a real hard thing to achieve here, but if you can, fantastic. So I don't accept that framing, I'm afraid, Dominic, with all due respect. Poppy from the Eye.
Thank you, Keir. Poppy Wood from the Eye. You said earlier this year that Labour would move on from its 2019 manifesto pledge to scrap university tuition fees and come up with a new plan to fix the current broken system, but you still haven't done so. Research shows that poorer students tend to leave university with far higher debt than their more advantaged peers. Can you really say that Labour will smash the glass ceiling while saddling poorer university students with tens of thousands of pounds of debt?
Look, we've got to change the tuition fees system because it is unfair and it needs to be changed, and we are going to put forward a plan, a fully costed plan, to show how we're going to do that. So we will set that out in due course and obviously take any questions at the time in relation to it. And it is very important for reasons that everybody understands in terms of the debt that young people at the moment carry with them. But I would also say this, and it was in the heart of the speech, when it comes to the class ceiling, whilst I do want more and more people to go to university, and obviously for me to be the first in my family, big thing for me and my family, equally, I want people to take the vocational route, the technical skills, the apprenticeships, etc., and for that to be equally valued. And therefore, this issue of tuition fees is part of the argument, but it cannot be construed in any way, I don't think, as the whole of the argument, because that wouldn't leave out of account all those people who don't go to university. So we will set out our plans, and you know, we are constrained. You know, when I say, and I've said this a number of times now, that the country, the economy that we inherit, if we are privileged enough to come into power, the economy will be damaged, really badly damaged, really badly damaged. This is not 1997 where the economy was growing. This is a really badly damaged economy after 13 years of very little growth, exacerbated by that kamikaze budget, with public services not on their knees but on their face. That means that we will have to take difficult decisions and that we may not be able to do all the things that an incoming Labour government would want to do as quickly as we would like to do, because that is what we inherit. But what I'm setting out is the base on which we will take our country forward, and the change that people can expect to see after 5 years. And the idea of mission is this sense of driving purpose, so we don't get knocked off course, so that we can measure against it, and so that we can take priorities and decisions about priorities in a consistent and coherent way. And frankly, if we'd had anything like the strategy and certainty that I'm setting out now in the last utter mess that we're in, and we're going round and round in circles, chopping and changing, complete failure. 5 prime ministers, 4 chancellors in the last year. This may be politically amusing. For the future security of the country, it's a disaster. And the sooner we can get rid of it, the better. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. How are you?